Welcome back, friends. So we were discussing about what are the challenges to a good organizational culture, and as I said, it is not easy to build a culture, to sustain a culture. And the first challenge that we have discussed is lack of clear vision and having clear core values that employees know and employees understand. So when that is missing, employees will not understand the organization's purpose, decision making would be hampered, and there won't be alignment across the team. And second challenge is that people resist change, so there is always resistance to change. Now the next topic that we are going to discuss under the challenges is poor leadership and role modeling. So we have already learnt about the role of a good leader in building a culture as well as in sustaining the culture. And culture is significantly shaped by leadership. And it is said that culture trickles from top to bottom, which means that top level management is responsible for shaping the culture, for creating a culture and sustaining that culture. And leaders who don't walk the talk, they sabotage the credibility of the organization. And hypocrisy at the top sends mixed signals, means if you are stating something but you are behaving in a totally opposite manner, this hypocrisy would actually sabotage or hamper your organization's culture. So this inconsistent enforcement of policies would lead to cynicism. And lack of empathy or support from leadership, it breeds disengagement. So again, the role of leadership has been reiterated here. So for example, a company promoting transparency may lose trust if the top executives make key decisions behind closed doors. So on one hand, leaders say that we are transparent, but on the other hand, when they are taking certain decisions, they do not involve the people, and they are taking it all by themselves behind closed doors. So obviously people won't trust them, and that would be a deterrent in having a good culture. Then another challenge that has always been observed in many organizations is the lack of effective communication. And this communication gaps, they can undermine trust, hinder collaboration and breed confusion. Because employees, when they are unclear about the expectations or the goals of the organization or the culture for that matter, they won't be able to perform to the best of their potential. Important updates may not trickle down to all levels, and misinformation can spread in the absence of clarity. For example, announcing a major restructuring through a vague email might cause panic and speculation among employees. So there is a massive reconstructing in the organization, and how the top management informs it through a vague email to the people, that would certainly cause stress and anxiety among the people. They might have the fear of losing their jobs, and they would start speculating certain things. This would impact their morale, impact their productivity and their performance. Then this could lead to high employee turnover even. So this high employee turnover is also a challenge for having a good organizational culture. So when people are constantly leaving or are being replaced, it is seen that the institutional knowledge and cultural memories are also lost, and new employees may not assimilate properly into the culture, and there is a continuous disruption to the team cohesion. So in the previous couple of lectures also, we talked why people are important for sustaining the culture. If people would constantly leaving the organization, new people would be coming, it would be difficult to sustain your culture, because new people would take some amount of time to understand your organization's culture. And apart from the culture, your institutional knowledge is also lost. So a fast scaling startup losing half its workforce every year would struggle to build a stable cultural identity, because the cultural identity comes from the people. If people are leaving the organization, how you are going to sustain your culture? That is the big question. Then comes cultural misalignment during mergers and acquisitions. So, these mergers and acquisitions are again a big challenge for organizations in terms of sustaining their culture or building their a good culture. So, when two organizations merge, cultural compatibility is often overlooked, because it goes without saying that the two organizations that are merging, that would be having a similar culture. No, they won't be having the same culture. There would be cultural disparity. There would be conflicting values, behaviors and norms, and this would create tension among people of both the organizations. And employees may feel alienated or confused about how things work now, because now, because of the merger or the acquisition, how things would work, how are we supposed to work, what is expected from us in the new structure, in the new setup. So, this integration could become chaotic, and certainly the productivity would suffer. So, during mergers and acquisitions, it is often seen that the culture gets diluted and it is difficult to sustain your culture. So, a creative design agency, for example, when it is acquired by a rigid corporate firm, it may face clashes over dress codes, over flexibility and the communication styles, because creative design agency is something where people would be more open and less rigid. But on the other hand, a rigid corporate firm would be less open. So, there could be cultural disparity regarding many aspects of working, of operations. So, this can again be posed as a challenge for having a good culture. Then unchecked toxic behaviors can also pose as a challenge for an organization's culture. So, tolerating or ignoring negative behaviors creates poisonous work environment. It signals that bad behavior is acceptable if the person is a high performer. So, what are you preferring? You are preferring performance over behavior, and this thought actually dilutes your behavior. You are promoting toxicity at the workplace, and because of this, other employees feel unsafe, they feel undervalued and demotivated, and because of this, the trust erodes quickly. People stop trusting the organization, people stop trusting their leaders. So, this kind of a toxic behavior needs to be checked, and it should not be ignored at any point of time. So, for example, an aggressive manager who belittles team members in meetings is not corrected by senior leadership. It would lead to fear and disengagement. Then another challenge that we are going to talk about is the inconsistency across departments or units. So, different parts of the organization may develop subcultures that conflict with each other. So, an organization would be having multiple units and multiple departments. So, at times what happens is that every department builds its own culture, because of which the original culture of the organization gets diluted. And when 2 or 3 departments have to work together, they would all be having different cultures or subcultures for that matter, which could be conflicting. And because of this, silos are formed, means everybody is working in a closed environment, and collaboration across functions, it becomes extremely difficult. So, whenever there are silos, there is no collaboration, no teamwork. And in such a scenario, the organizational goals, they take a back seat to departmental priorities. For example, the finance department follows a strict hierarchical structure while the marketing team thrives on informal brainstorming and flat hierarchy. Now, both these cultures or subcultures, they are conflicting with each other. This can create friction when these both the departments, finance and marketing, when they have to work together, it would certainly create friction and confusion among people. The next one is the lack of employee engagement and ownership. Again, extremely important for having a culture, building a culture or sustaining a culture. Employees' engagement is of paramount importance, because if employees feel disconnected from the culture, they may not embody its values. They treat work as a job, not a mission. Initiatives to build culture, they feel artificial or forced. So, when people are not emotionally connected with the organization's culture, when they do not bring their whole emotional selves to the work or to the organization, and they lack this ownership, that won't help the organization sustain its culture. And what could be the causes? It could be poor recognition systems, absence of purpose, lack of inclusion, limited opportunities for growth. There can be n number of reasons or causes due to which the employees feel disconnected from their organization's culture. And if they feel disconnected, that culture cannot be sustained. So, employees, for example, who feel their voice does not matter are unlikely to participate in feedback surveys or cultural workshops. So, again, if there is this misalignment is there, that you say something but you do something else, employees won't feel the need to behave in a particular manner. So, if they know that these feedbacks are just for the sake of taking a feedback, and whatever feedback we are providing, those things are not actually implemented, so they would certainly not want to participate in any of such feedbacks. Then another one is the overemphasis on short term results. So, this is again a challenge. So, an obsessive focus on hitting quarterly targets and not thinking about the long term goals or long term results can also be a deterrent in having a good organizational culture. So, this could certainly encourage unethical behavior, because all that we want is a short term result. It could discourage innovation and experimentation, because if you have to innovate, you need time, you have to be ready to fail, you have to at times you have to invest a certain amount of time, of money, efforts. So, if you are discouraging innovation and experimentation, and you are more towards looking the short term results only, this could cause burnout due to unrealistic performance pressures. So, sales team leader under immense pressure to meet the targets might hide returns or offer deep discounts, but what would happen is that it would damage the long term profitability as well as trust. So, we have to be very careful when it comes to making promises or giving discounts to our people. Are we looking for a short term solution, or we want to build a long term trust with our customers? So, friends, creating a good organizational culture is not a one time initiative, but an ongoing journey. Awareness of these challenges would help organizations proactively build systems that nurture values. It would train leaders to become culture champions and culture ambassadors. It ensures alignment between goals, behavior, and people practices. Now that we understand organizational culture, creating culture, sustaining culture, how about changing organizational culture? So, organizational culture, as we said in the beginning also, that it is not static, it evolves with the environment, and environment is ever changing, it is dynamic, it changes with leadership, It changes with the workforce because people come, people go, and people are different. People's expectations are different. And even the market dynamics, that also impacts the organization culture. So, but changing culture is a strategic long term endeavor that requires intent, patience and consistency. So, on one side we talk about sustaining culture even in the face of crisis, and on the other hand we are now talking about changing organization culture. So, these two things are contradictory and ironic, but yes, change is the language that today's environment speaks. So, why change organizational culture means what is the need to change culture that has to be understood by the organization. Means it is not something that everybody is changing our culture, okay, let us change our culture as well. No. So, you have to understand the need for change. So, friends, as we all know that change is the only constant, and changing the culture becomes essential when the existing one becomes a barrier to growth, innovation or ethical functioning. So, it is okay to sustain your culture, but at all times you have to assess whether your culture is becoming a barrier to your own growth, whether it is becoming a barrier to your innovation and the ethical functioning. So, that you need to keep on assessing. Then you need to change the culture to align with new strategy or vision. So, when companies pivot, for example, from manufacturing to a tech enabled services, their existing culture might no longer serve their purpose, because now your vision is changed, now your strategies are changed. So, your culture has to be aligned with your strategy and vision mission statements. So, for example, the IBM's shift from hardware to a consulting and software driven company, it required a culture shift from control and hierarchy to more agility and client centricity. So, when you pivot, you have to change your culture as well. You cannot keep the previous culture, since we talked about sustaining culture. But in both the scenarios, we would see that the environment is different, the vision is different and the intent is different. Then at times, to survive or recover from crisis, you need to change your organization's culture, because toxic or weak cultures, they often contribute to ethical failures or business decline. Like Uber faced serious cultural backlash for its aggressive toxic culture and had to bring in new leadership to instill trust, transparency and inclusion. To drive innovation and agility, again you need to change your culture. If you are having a rigid bureaucratic culture, this would hinder your creativity, your responsiveness to market changes. So, whenever we talk about innovation, we talk about agility, you have to be creative, you have to be responsive. So, Microsoft under Satya Nadella redefined its culture from internal competition to collaboration and learning, so as to make it innovation driven and cloud focused. So, when you are in the market, when you stand for innovation, you would have to redefine your culture, you would have to change your culture. Then at times, to attract and retain talent, it becomes important to change your culture. Today we are talking about millennials, Gen Z employees, since they are more in the workforce. So, we have to understand their expectations, their priorities, and these generations, be it millennials or the Gen Zs, they prioritize inclusive, purpose driven and transparent cultures, and more of flat cultures rather than having a lot of matrix or a hierarchy within the organization. So, for example, Salesforce, it promotes a culture of Ohana, which is nothing but the name for a family, focusing on belonging, equality, well-being to keep top talent engaged. So, in order to attract and retain your talent, you have to bring in fresh culture. So, what are the advantages of changing organizational culture? If with time, with the changing market scenario, with changing people, with a lot of uncertainty in the environment, if you ever think of changing your culture, what would be the benefits or the advantages that you can get? So, that would lead certainly to improved employee engagement and morale. So, a positive shift in culture, it often boosts motivation and loyalty. So, Adobe's move to eliminate performance ratings and adopt a coaching culture improved its employees' satisfaction. Then there can be greater innovation and adaptability. So, culture change towards openness, risk taking would support faster innovation cycles. So, if you let people bring in new ideas, bring in innovation, that would certainly have a great impact on your organization's uh, trend to innovate. So, for example, Netflix culture of freedom and responsibility, it empowers innovation without micromanagement. Then it also leads to better alignment with strategy. So, when culture matches strategic goals, execution becomes smoother. For example, Infosys invested in design thinking and digital skilling to transform its traditional delivery focused culture into one that is focused on innovation and consulting. Then it enhances the reputation and trust, the image of your organization. So, culture rooted in ethics and transparency builds brand equity and stakeholder trust. Like we did the case study of Patagonia. So, Patagonia's environmentally responsible culture enhances its global appeal among the eco conscious consumers. So, we learned this with the example of its advertisement, which was a marketing genius stating, "Don't buy this jacket," which actually emphasized that at times we are overbuying. So, it stated that we should buy responsibly only when we need it and not just for the sake of buying. Then, on one hand, if there are advantages of changing culture, there can be certain disadvantages as well as challenges of changing culture. So, one would certainly be the resistance to change. So, if you are changing culture, employees may be emotionally or psychologically invested in the old ways, and they would say that this is how we have always done it. So, why should we do it the other way? Why should we now behave in another way? So, employees, they would resist to change. Then there can be culture clashes, especially during mergers and acquisitions for organizations that have different cultural values, and this could create conflicts. For example, the Daimler Chrysler merger failed in part because of the clashing German and American corporate cultures. So, Germany and America, they have totally different corporate cultures. So, when they came together, there were a lot of cultural clashes. So, it takes time and resources. Culture change is not quick. It may take years of consistent behavior, communication and leadership modeling. So, building a culture takes so much time, and when we are thinking of changing the culture, it would again certainly not be a quick thing to happen. It would again take years to establish that culture. Then there can be initial decline in performance. So, whenever you are changing the culture, restructuring, mergers or due to technological changes, or environmental, like during the COVID, many physical offices were converted into work from home type of HR policies. So, whenever this kind of a thing happens, there would be initial decline in the performance. Disrupting routines and shifting norms would create uncertainty, reducing productivity during this particular transition phase. So, how we can successfully change the culture? So, changing organizational culture is one of the most challenging and transformating endeavors an organization can undertake. It requires vision, strategy, consistent action, and emotional intelligence, and a comprehensive guide to understanding how to successfully change culture is elaborated one by one. So, how you can successfully change culture? So, the first step is to assess the current culture. Second is to define the desired culture aligned with the strategy. The third step would be engage leadership to model new behaviors, because without the involvement of leaders, we can't expect a changed culture to be incorporated in an organization. Leadership's role is of vital importance, and they are the ones who are going to tell how to behave. So, first of all, they themselves have to engage, they themselves have to change their own behaviors. Step 4 is align systems like the hiring, reward system, communication, performance appraisal with the new values. So, your previous culture is not going to work now. So, since you have to change, you have to align it with the new values, and then reinforce and measure the change over time. Means, have you been successful in bringing about a new culture or not? Because again, as I said, that building culture and changing culture would take time, it would require patience, but at the same time you have to reinforce and make sure that it is properly implemented. So, we will discuss about all these steps in a detailed manner in the next lecture. Thank you for now.